So, welcome. We're very excited to have you. And
Yeah,
I know that I said that we're going to have a casual chat and a drink together and just catch up. But we also have a lot of participants who are very, very eager to ask you some questions, especially seeing as you're kind of the big uh, guru of the creative mojo. And I think that a lot of people are having a hard.
let's hope so.
Sorry.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best to be the big guru.
Well, let's start actually with how you got involved then with NaNoWriMo.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one part was as a writer, and that's probably the more interesting part to your community or the attendees here. And then the other part is actually like as officially as a board member, and then later on as an executive director. But as a writer, I just basically woke up one day and I asked myself the question, did I decide on my creative process or did it decide on me? I was sort of in my midlife, I guess, at that point, and I've been writing, or you know how I mean, a creative write process does just kind of happen to you, and generally that's probably a good thing. Like you're finding your way intuitively to what works. But I just thought I needed to shake things up, and so I thought one good way to just shake things up, and I think this is good for any writer at any point, is to try things. And they always say the best way you're learning when you're uncomfortable. So sometimes we only do the things that are comfortable. And NaNoWriMo was actually uncomfortable for me because I was the type of writer who would write a sentence or a paragraph or a chapter and then would rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it, searching for that perfect rhythm, word. Yeah, a lot of us are like that, and that can be, there's a place for that, and that can be good. But what I found is that I was putting so much of my energy into like the first part of the book and maybe the first even third of the book, and trying to get that perfect, that the rest of the book, the novel, wasn't getting as much attention. And also what I learned is that a lot of that making the first chapter perfect before moving on to the second chapter, well, oftentimes that first chapter gets entirely cut in revision, so there's no reason to really make it perfect. The main thing is, as I learned through NaNoWriMo, oops, I've got a phone here, is to focus on progress and reaching the end of the story. And that is in part, I love this Joyce Carol Oates quote, and she said that you don't know the first sentence of your story until you've written the last sentence, which I think is true. And I'm going to pause and get this annoying phone right now. And I'm sorry, your attendees are probably going to have to see the. Sorry for that. This is the downside of recording from home. Yeah. I hope that answered the question. And then as an executive director, I basically was working for the National Writing Project, and which is a nonprofit in Berkeley that focuses on helping teachers teach writing better. And I wanted to deepen my nonprofit management knowledge. And Chris Beatty, the founder of NaNoWriMo, was an acquaintance of mine, and I just randomly sent him an email and said, hey, do you know of any arts-oriented nonprofits in the Bay Area that need a board member? And we got together and started talking, and he said, why don't you join my board? And I was just overwhelmed with gratitude. I never thought that I would be invited to join such a board. And then when I joined the board, he took me aside and he said, by the way, I'm stepping down as executive director and I think you should apply. I hadn't planned on that, but Chris persuaded me to apply, and somehow I got the job, and here I am.
So, as well, as you know, I was the ED for MCWC.
That's right.
How much did your ED-ship like overtake your writing? Like, how much time do you spend on that versus writing? And does it kind of, do you ever find yourself struggling to get back to the writing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think when I was in my early 20s and first decided to be a fiction writer, I basically structured my days for optimal writing time. So I waited tables in the evening, or I worked in a bookstore in the evening. And those were wonderful times because that was time where my life was really dedicated pretty much 100% to writing. But now that I have kids and a more professionally demanding job, it's a really tough thing. And yeah, I dream. Like all of us, I bet. I dream of having that more idyllic time to write, but most of us don't have that, and we will never get that. And so we have to find a way to, open up time in our lives to write. And this is another thing that NaNoWriMo taught me is don't wait for the perfect time to write. Seize on those moments that are available to you. So Ray Bradbury wrote a lot of his novels during his lunch breaks, and he had a half an hour to write, and he would go to the UCLA library and he'd put quarters in the little dispensary because they timed your ability to write. Very NaNoWriMo, by the way, to set yourself a goal and a deadline. You got 30 minutes, write as much as you can, and just crank out that novel. And I heard this word defining that as time confetti. And so we have, these little sprinkles of time available to us in the day. So I try to find those moments, and I used to, when I first started at NaNoWriMo, I would drive and park, and I would sit in the car for 5 or 10 minutes and write. And that 5 or 10 minutes makes a big difference in the day. I like to tell this story about Toni Morrison, who she was a single working mother in New York City before she published any of her books. And she wrote her first book by writing for 15 minutes every day. And that she would do that after she, got her kids to bed. So it wasn't the perfect time for her to have the energy to write. She just used that 15 minutes, and you can build something really big out of those small increments. And so I very fortunately have a very wacky sleep schedule. So I wake up very early in the morning. So sometimes I'm up at 4 or 5 and I get an hour or two in of writing. So somehow it all works out. But yeah, I'll take more idyllic writing time any day.
Do you right now though? Do you kind of set aside your mornings? Like so, the length might vary, but you're always writing first thing in the morning, or do you have
I
kind of more structured or scheduled like that, or do you really go after the confetti?
Both, but I do fortunately wake up pretty early, and so I can dedicate usually an hour or so in the morning, sometimes 2 hours to writing. But I do think I juggle a lot of different writing projects, and so I am looking for those. I don't like moments to go to waste, and I find these days it's so easy for us to grab our phones and to use those moments of time confetti just to scroll through stuff on the internet. And I really am a believer that boredom nurtures our imagination and allows thoughts to come out and deepens our thoughts. And so I think allowing those more moments of boredom, being present in them, using them to be imaginative or using them productively to write is really important. And I hear these amazing stories of people who, will use their phone to write while they're on a subway, like they're using these moments that are otherwise not creative, and they're finding ways to make them creative. And I think that's really wonderful and an interesting challenge for us all.
Hmm. So NaNoWriMo is often talked about as a way to improve your productivity. Um, but I was really interested in a quote that's actually from your website, where you actually said that in 2010, um, when you when you participated as a participant, you managed to complete your novel. You managed to hit your goals, and you said it took your novel in many directions, which you would call daring. So how did the NaNoWriMo process actually change the way, not just like that it made you write, but how did it change you to be more daring? What was your experience of that?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, because I think, a lot of the NaNoWriMo, I talk a lot about its productivity benefits, but I think it has a lot of creative benefits too. And part of that is that focus on progress, and you take creative risks by necessity, sometimes just to move the story forward. If you sometimes I'd open up my laptop in the morning and I wouldn't have a clear direction for the novel. So I easily could have shut down and not written anything. But because I needed to hit that daily word count goal, I started writing something. And sometimes that was stuff that I didn't want to deal with, or I cut immediately in revision. But sometimes there were these little gifts or gems, that I wrote by taking those dares. And I think there's also something, I mean, part of the premise of NaNoWriMo is you're banishing your inner editor. You're opening yourself up to possibilities, and writing for quantity can lead to quality too. And so I think just by opening yourself up and taking risks, I think of it sometimes like being an improv actor. They're not overthinking what they're doing on stage. They're accepting what their partner on stage gives them, and they're just going with it to discover what's possible. And so I think NaNoWriMo holds that kind of improvisational writing that a dramatic actor is more famous for dramatic actors to use. And so, yeah, so opening, being more vulnerable, willing to be more ridiculous, less perfect. There's a whole theme here, and I think that is a really a creative skill that needs to be. I mean, it takes practice, like anything. And so I think it's a really good tool to have in your creative toolbox. There are times when I want to sit and be perfect, and there are times when imperfection will lead me to a better kind of perfect, I guess.
And do you still participate every November?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's the best part of my job description.
So, in addition to NaNoWriMo, you're obviously a creative writer yourself, and you've been doing a lot of short form writing lately, correct?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you have lots of writing projects. So are you writing long form and short form at the same time? And I know that you also write many articles for journals. So how are you mixing that up, and does one distract you from the other, or how do you?
That's interesting. Yeah. Sometimes they don't distract. I think they feed into each other. They nourish each other, really. I do love. I mean, one benefit of the short form writing, and I actually started and gravitated towards it because of this, was it provides me a nice break from the long form. Like, to write a novel or to write a book, they just go through so many drafts, and they require such immersion, and sometimes that immersion can get really tiring. And so it's really nice to take a break and write flash fiction or shorter fiction. I mean, stories I've written the most or published the most are 100-word stories, and so they're a brief break from the longer form. They're more poetic. They're more lyrical. They're just different. They don't have the burden of a huge, intricate plot or a lot of chapters. And in some ways, they're easier to publish. I can write them, I can publish them, and so they have this built-in sense of gratification, or just I can finish them. And so they can build momentum and kind of feed my creative juices. And so I'll juggle a lot of projects, to tell you the truth, but it's nice to take a break from the longer projects and do some shorter fiction. I'd like to do more of it, to tell you the truth.